Welcome back to another episode of the Menswear Style Podcast. I'm your host, Pete Brooker. Today on the show, I am speaking to Mark Warman. I'm actually looking at him now on the screen. He's modeling his military jackets on Facebook, which he does. He talks about the journey of the jackets that he makes. They craft limited edition jackets, modern classics inspired by heritage workwear, military uniform, and cafe racer culture. Interesting chat this. Mark's very tuned into the digital marketing side of the brand, and to tell you more about the story of Barnfield Customs is the founder, Mark Warman. How are we doing today, Mark?
Very well, Pete. Thanks very much for having me on.
And I've got to say, probably in the pantheon of all the guests that we've had on the show, Mark, you're set up there with the microphone, the backdrop, the brick wall, the clothings on the concertinas there. 10 out of 10, my friend.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I definitely try my best.
Yeah, you've done it in spades. Well, Mark, please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us all about Barnfield Customs.
Yeah, so I think there's a short and a long answer. I'll go short first. So I'm Mark Warman, and I founded Barnfield Customs, officially founded it in January 2020, just before COVID hit. So my timing was absolutely perfect. And then in May 2023, I finally launched my first jacket, which was it was called the Lawrence jacket. I can go into that, but basically it was inspired by the first inspiration was a picture that I have of my great grandfather in his World War I uniform. So there was that military influence. And when I was looking online, just kind of I'd seen the picture, had the inspiration there, and was looking online. And I kept coming across a picture of a guy sat on a motorbike, massive smile on his face, and he was chatting to somebody else, again smiling, but leant on these two wooden canes. And then it was, I found out that was T. Lawrence of Lawrence of Arabia fame, and he stood astride or sat astride a Brough Superior motorbike. And so I grew up in the Middle East. And that's where I actually set up a digital marketing agency over there as well. And that's where I was working.
Whereabouts in the Middle East were you, Mark?
Bahrain.
Bahrain.
So, yeah, I was born over there, and I was there, finished school until I came back for college, university, and work, but then actually moved back out there in 2007 and set up a digital marketing agency. So kind of my background is very much based in that part of the world. But when I moved back to the UK, I'm in Nottingham. And I was at that time I was building motorbikes with a friend of mine. So there was these real kind of synergies in that story. So that's why it made sense for the jacket to be called the Lawrence jacket. So that was launched in May 2023 and finally delivered in October 2023. And since then, I've been reevaluating and de-risking.
Nice. Well, we had just a chat off mic about digital marketing and your background in digital marketing. And I was actually quite pleased to hear you use the term digital marketing, because I think when people talk about, well, let's just say content creators specifically, or influencers or podcasters, I mean, it's all just under the umbrella of digital marketing. That's all it is. Like anyone that does writing online or e-commerce or SEO, it's all digital marketing. And I think it's as soon as we kind of just get a handle on that's what it's called, then I think we'll all be in a better place. But so I'm interested. Yeah. But I'm interested that you have the mechanical background as well as the digital marketing background. So was it like a yin yang thing? Like after you're done sitting down at the computer, you feel like I've got to get outside and get my hands dirty.
So I ran my digital marketing agency for 10 years, set it up in 2017, and then brought it to a close as far as an agency goes. So we were doing website design and development, email marketing, social media marketing, the really kind of like at the coalface side of digital marketing. And I did that for 10 years. But then at the end of 2017, my wife had actually come on and was working in the agency as well. And we just totally burnt out. Because it's so cliche, but we were kind of victims of our own success in that Bahrain is a very small island. There's, I think, there's about 1.2, 1.3 million people on the island, but you have access to some incredible brands. So we worked with Porsche and Audi, and we were working for the government and all sorts of stuff. We really built up a great agency, but finding people to work for you within the agency, it's a tiny, tiny pool. And of
Mm,
course, having set up initially set up as a design agency, but very quickly moved into digital marketing, there wasn't the experience. So it's not, even if I wanted to, I couldn't really poach people from other agencies. I think for most of the time we were we were one of two agencies that were there.
mm.
So
Couldn't people
so
work
basically
from home though in that respect, or did you have to have people local to you in Bahrain?
we did. By the time I closed down the agency, we were locally a team of six, but I think I had a team of about 32 freelancers
Right, right.
like around the world. So we would do our web design and development, I would design a lot of the design I would do, but the development was done in Ukraine.
Mm,
And then we had people helping out with the SEO side of things and email marketing in the Philippines, and actually we worked with a design firm in Liverpool as well. So we had but in terms of the day-to-day client servicing, you need boots on the ground.
mm.
Um, and so we would very often we would put our employees first, but that meant that we ended up taking the brunt of the work, and it just got to the point where it wasn't sustainable anymore.
And then the motorbiking, how does that come into it? I'm intrigued.
So this was bring the agency to a close 2017. Then I went into consultancy for a couple of years, but there
Mm,
was this real sense that like whatever I did digitally, it was here today, gone tomorrow. I always talk, the example use is always with Porsche, like the importance of getting that content right before publishing it, because you're doing it on behalf of a brand like that. It was incredibly important. So we would go through all sorts of checks and procedures to make sure that what we were putting out was right. Only to 2 hours later, you're on to the next thing. So you might spend
mm,
2 weeks creating a piece of content only for it just to disappear.
yeah,
So that was when I brought the agency to a close and I decided that I was going to do something else. It was this kind of reaction to that of being stuck behind a computer and then wanting to work with my hands. And it was a similar sort of, by the time I finished the consultancy, it was COVID. And
right.
so we were stuck. The intention had been to move back to England, but we stayed in Bahrain for a little bit longer just whilst everything settled down. And yeah, I picked up a 300-pound motorbike that had never been cared for, never had any attention given to it. And I brought it back to life, did a full nuts and bolts restoration, and turned it from a pizza delivery bike into a lovely little cafe racer.
So how did you learn that though? Is this, I mean, we will get onto the brand as well at some point.
You sure? Yeah, no, it's
But
fine.
okay, so I mean, I've got this theory that I'm 45 now, and I've
Yep.
spent about 20 odd years of my life just on construction sites, right? I've worked
Okay.
every demeaning job, but I've always been outside and I've always been rolling my sleeves up, and it's always been back-breaking work, horrible
Yeah.
work at the best of
Yeah.
times, but it's always
Yeah.
been that kind of work. But I've never known anyone on any construction site that kind of suffered from any like mental anxiety. There was
Mm.
no nut allergies. There was none of the modern day ailments that we seem to be
Yeah.
plagued with today. And I'm convinced it's because when we went outside and we did something and we made something, it was palpable. You had something to show for it.
Mhm.
I mean, I still know a wall in my mum's village that I actually built. You know, I'm
Nice.
like, it's
Yeah.
one
I
of the
mean, talk about
proudest things that I've
legacy.
done, right? And it's made
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
A-listed bricks. We had to get the bricks from another workplace because they had to have these special bricks and these stones from the Roman days, whatever. And we schlepped them over, and we built it. And but at no
Yeah.
point did I go home and gone, well, that was a waste of time. I
No.
didn't think like I've wasted anything. And I feel like now when people just create something digitally, and by the way, we do it all the time. I make spreadsheets and PowerPoint
Mhm.
presentations. It's nothing that you can really take away with you and put on the shelf. It's
Yeah.
something that you do at a meeting, maybe put on a whiteboard, and then it's off again. Like you say, the next day it's
Yeah.
irrelevant almost. So I'm just, but getting back to my point, I feel like the
Mm.
sense of why a lot of guys feel a little bit empty at the moment, especially, is because they're not actually creating something that they can be proud of or they can show off. How do you how do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's something to do with something innate in humans, and it's about a sense of legacy,
Mm.
leaving something behind. That wall will be there for what, 100, 200, 300,000 years? It could be there forever,
Yeah.
until the
I
world
better get
comes
my
to an end.
I better get my plaque on it, like before
Yeah,
I croak.
exactly.
Or maybe
Dig a
just
hole. You
as
should have
I,
made sure
yeah,
one of the foundation bricks had your name on it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I should have done something else other than like naughty graffiti. But yeah, you're right. I'll have to go back
But I
and fix
think
it.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that was building that motorbike saw me through COVID.
Yeah.
Like everyone had their own experience with COVID, and I think I was incredibly fortunate to have. In many ways, it was incredibly disruptive because we also left home. We left Bahrain partway through it to move back to
Mm.
the UK, and came back into kind of like the aftermath of COVID. So rents were insane, house prices were like everything had just gone crazy, and so it was incredibly disruptive. But the actual day to day of that kind of 2020, I saw it through with building that bike, and it kept me sane.
Yeah, I looked at COVID in two ways. You could either put on 20 pounds and come out with it as a 40 a day habit, or you could write a book or pick up a new skill, maybe learn a
Yeah,
language. And you're kind of either one or two things. You either go off the rails, binge watch everything on telly,
yeah,
or you come out of it with a skill set and you push yourself on and you progress. But that's
yeah.
select people kind of meet a
I
fork in
think
the
it
road with
also,
that.
yeah, and I think it also depends on a lot of it depended on your living situation. I can't
Mm.
imagine what it would have been like in a one-bedroom flat.
It was
Just
horrible.
right, okay, yeah, no, and I just can't. I think you would have had to be very present and have a vision, have an aspirational vision for the future to be able to make something of that situation.
Yeah, it was getting out of that flat. That was my vision.
Yeah,
I
sure.
sorted that straight out. As soon as I saw a place on a ground floor flat with a bit of garden space, I'm like, I'm having that.
Yeah, I bet.
I want to talk about the brand.
Sure.
So speaking about that though, and everything you just told me, it feels like
Mm,
the brand has been spawned perhaps from the iconography of your youth, where you've put mental things on your mood board maybe years earlier.
yeah.
And now when it comes to the new project, you've got like a nice canvas to draw upon. But perhaps the jacket itself, the Lawrence jacket,
Mm.
how are we going about making it? Are you then having to develop a new skill set? You said it took 3 years. Are you now pattern cutting or are you farming that out? Tell me about
No, I'm very much farming that out.
that. It's
I know
hard, I
where
know.
my skill set lies, and I know where it doesn't.
Yeah,
And so initially, the first check that I ever got from the first website I designed, that went straight onto a bespoke suit because there were
yeah.
tailors on every corner in Bahrain. It's still got a traditional kind of souk, so I was able to go into the tailors, and that was, the joy that I got out of that was incredible. And I think because I was really young when I set up my agency, and so I wanted to reduce as many barriers as I could. So
Mm,
looking good, giving me
mm.
myself the confidence that I could kind of work in this world where people were 20 years my senior. That came from that purchase. Um, and so when I set up, I mean, Barnfield was initially I'd been looking at developing an athleisure wear brand that used sustainable fabrics, that used merino wools and that side of things. But I quickly moved away from that when I realized again, you buy a t-shirt, your t-shirt's going to last you. If you wear it properly, it is going to last you a year, maybe two, and then you're going to move on. So it was wanting to create something that had longevity. And I talk about I want my jackets to be able to be passed down to father to son.
Mm.
I want it to be considered like a generational investment. And so I started the process in Bahrain by going to local tailors and kind of going, this is the idea, this is my sketch. But I had this sense that, it's so naive, but like I had this sense that, I just go down to the tailor and I'll get these jackets made. It'll be great. It'll be fine. That's all I need to
Whip
do.
these up for me in half an hour. I'll be back.
Yeah. See you later. And so, yeah, obviously, I learned very quickly
Mm.
that there was a lot more to it than knowing how a good suit feels. And so, and even the fact that it's not a suit jacket. It's inspired by military uniform, but the kind of dress uniform. There's so many different parts to it. So I had to learn everything basically. It doesn't just come from, you might have a design sense and a sense of taste, but creating something that's going to work commercially is a completely different kettle of fish.
Mm. So how do you know, or do you know that when you get into this, it is a commercial option and not maybe a passion project that you want to get off or get out of your chest, if that makes sense?
I think I always wanted it. I think it needed to be a commercial venture for me
Mm.
because
Mm.
the amount of time that's required to put into it. And I think that it's not just the time. I think it's knowing that you're creating something, because yes, there's the jackets that I talk about, wanting to create some sort of sense of legacy with the generational jackets, making them to that quality that they're going to last. But it's the brand as well. It's everything is brought together, and I think that's what drew me towards clothing in the first place, was that I could bring each of those skills together, whether it was the design, whether it's the digital marketing, whether it, and it all comes together with these products.
Right. Yeah, it's good. I mean, you've got skill sets that you can lean on already, and that kind of dovetails into what you're doing on the physical side with making the
Yeah,
jackets, right?
yeah. I mean, hmm, you can you can either pay and you can outsource these things,
Mm,
or you can pay in money and outsource it, or you can pay in time and do
mm,
it yourself. And that so I'm very, it's great that I have these skill sets, that I've been able to develop the website, to do the social media, do the email marketing, set up all those funnels, all that sort of stuff, so that everything's being communicated right. But it's cost me in time and it's
mm.
cost me an opportunity. But it does mean that I know every part of the business.
Yeah.
So it's pros and cons.
What are the new rules for business? Listen to Challenger X to find out.
You publicly talk about how much you've exited for.
This makes sense, okay? So people don't talk about this. I don't understand why
Right.
people don't talk about it. Just tell them the damn number,
Yeah.
right? It's not like, I mean, so I say I sold my company for 56 million. That's not how much money I got in my bank account, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other calculations that go on after that. So just tell the number, because it's useful for other entrepreneurs to know. Most companies exit around $30 million, right? I talk to people all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, if I can't get $1 billion exit, I don't know why I'm bothering doing that. Most companies exit for 30 million. You should know that kind of data.
Like what you hear? Listen to Challenger X for more.
How many jackets did you make in the first run, or is it like a continuation? You make, say, a limited run and then you produce more?
The intention, what I'd said, like, and just picking a figure out of the air, I was like, I'm going to do 300 jackets. It's still a limited number, but I'm going to do 300. Then by the time I actually got through to the launching the jacket, I got in touch with each of the suppliers, because there are so many different component parts to that jacket. Whether it was it was a GOT certified organic cotton gabardine, 350 GSM gabardine was the outer. Then it was quilted, and the quilting was done with wool from British farms, and then from a place in Shepley. But then I had to have that quilted, and that was quilted separately onto again, like an organic cotton that had a full printed artwork piece on it that I can talk through as well. The buttons. There were so many different component parts to bring that together. So just before I launched, I got in touch with each of my suppliers just to make sure that we were okay and they were ready to take my order. And when I got in touch about the gabardine, they were like, "No, we've stopped production. In fact, we're closing down because the cost of raw cotton has gone up so much that our clients, we can't keep the business open,
And
basically."
was this because of COVID?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was COVID. There was also the whole problem with the Suez Canal getting blocked up, and then there was the Ukraine-Russia conflict as well. It all came together.
Yeah, perfect compost for torpedoing a
exactly.
business, right?
Yeah, and I think some companies were able to deal with it, and some weren't. And the guys doing the gabardine, they closed up shop, but they were like, "Look, we've got this roll of 100 meters, and we can sell you that." So that meant that I could do 50 jackets.
Okay.
And so at the time, I was absolutely gutted. And I was like, I've said that I'm going to do 300, like, because if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it, and I think that it's important to build that trust and authenticity in a person, but in a brand as well, that you live by your promises.
Did you have any
And so,
pre-sold already?
no, I hadn't. I just been building up kind of signals of interest, people signing up to a wait list.
Right.
And then this came through, and as I said, I was absolutely gutted, but in hindsight, I'm so glad, because I could have never ever overseen 300. to the individual level that I did. They were all being packaged individually. I was going and overseeing the production, and to oversee 300 I would have absolutely melted.
Yeah. And it gives it that bit more exclusivity as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
and yeah. I mean, talking about the exclusivity I was talking about the artwork on the
Yeah,
inside.
tell me about that.
Quilting. So there's this guy, Thomas Moore, who runs a company called Last Maps out of York, and he does incredible artwork, and it's all points. So if you have a look at the Barnfield Customs logo, there's a red kite in the middle of that, and that's hand drawn, and it's millions of little dots that he has hand done to create that, to create the shading and all of that. So early on in the process of developing the Lawrence, I found his artwork through another friend, and but I was thinking, how can I integrate it? I'm so drawn to his work. I want to be able to integrate it into what I'm doing somehow. And between the two of us, we developed this idea of having a roadmap of Great Britain, and then within that having illustrations that kind of identified some parts of Great Britain, and whether it was wildlife or whether it was the White Cliffs of Dover or whatever it was. And so there's 118 different illustrations on top of this roadmap, and they're all hand drawn. But the artwork was 2.5 meters tall by 1.5 meters wide. So of course, none of the jackets are 2.5 meters long.
Yeah.
So it was a repeating pattern, but the way it was cut, it meant that no two jackets were exactly the same.
Interesting.
So
someone's going to have Big Ben and someone's going to have, I don't know, Lowestoft Pier.
Yeah, well, the Sutton Hoo kind of mask, and then you've got there's a beautiful one that he did and some of the illustrations tied in. So he's got someone fly fishing, and as they're fly fishing, the actual line is whipping back, and as it whips over, from that comes off like a swallow, and then a spitfire, and then a swallow, and so you've got loads of different things going on there, and I wanted it to be this thing that you open up the jacket, and you're delighted every time you see it because you're seeing something new every time.
Sounds cool. I mean, my ambition would be to get all 50 people together that have bought the jacket and have them do a flat lay and have the map out. So they'll be wearing their jackets and it'll be like a jigsaw piece coming together.
Yeah, you could do it, but you've got jackets went over to Australia, over to America.
I'm not saying it would be easy, but it's not undoable.
But if it's worth doing it's right? Never going to be easy.
So, Mark, we're running out of time on the Zoom. Sorry, I got talking too much about my wall back in my mum's village. I feel like
but that's fine. We can always stop start if necessary.
Well, maybe talk about the brand and maybe the next project that we got on the go and where we're going to go in 2025, please.
Yeah, so obviously I said I launched the Lawrence in 2023, and then I delivered that in October 23. So 24, but it was all from start to finish. That jacket was all undertaken by one person in terms of the pattern making, the pattern cutting, the grading, the stitching, everything. There was a lady called Agnes in Leicester, and she's talk about jack of all trades, master of none, but she was a master of each of these parts. She was incredible. But by the end of doing 50 jackets, she had carpal tunnel syndrome in her wrists, right? So that wasn't good for her, and it wasn't good for me because I knew that was pretty shaky foundations to build the brand on. So 2024 was this year has entirely been kind of setting up that business. So other things I'm working with specific people for pattern making. There's a factory that's making the jackets up in Bolton. So it was kind of de-risking and setting things up. But I have been developing a peacoat that I'm working on at the moment. And again, it's with the Lawrence, the thing that started me off with that was the collar, having this kind of stand-up collar and this military look and then everything kind of came from that. And with the peacoat, it was I was looking at cuff designs in there's a book I've got called Vintage Menswear, and just looking at all of those and just being inspired by that and looking at cuff designs, and it all kind of stemmed from this military style cuff. and went on from that. So it's the
Nice.
same sort of deal in that you've got this jacket that's kind of workwear in its roots, but it's got shoulder pads, it's got beautiful kind of felt and canvas sleeve head roll, articulated sleeves, and it's kind of elevated into being more dress wear than it is workwear.
Nice. And have we delivered that, or is that something
No.
that's in the
No,
making?
sample three is underway, and
How many
should be.
samples? How many samples?
Yeah,
are
sample
we-
three. So yeah, the Lawrence was 7 samples to get me there.
Okay.
So this one is 3. So things are moving in the right direction.
Nice.
So well, I hope it's 3. So that should be with me before Christmas. I'm expecting that 17th, 18th of December.
And when I think of peacoats, Mark, I think of like my mind always goes to films and costume design on films. I typically think of the Sand Peoples with Steve McQueen and Skyfall, the Billy Reed coat that Daniel Craig
Yeah.
wears. Do you have any of those kind of images in your mind when you're trying to, like, what are the machinations of what you're thinking going out on the page to execution?
I mean, I don't really look at other brands particularly because I think, there's the whole kind of comparison is the thief of all joy. And it's very easy to look at somebody else's journey when they're 10 years down the line and start to question your own. I think the visions that I have are, the kind of, as I said, like this military dress uniform. It's sharp and it's strong and it's masculine. And yeah, I mean, of course, James Bond comes to mind, and of course, Steve McQueen or Robert Redford. In fact, but I do have, and I talk about this. There's a video I did on Instagram, kind of talking about the history of the peacoat, and there's a picture I've got of my dad walking along in Bournemouth, and he's wearing a peacoat. And I think when I was about 21, I ended up taking that off him. So there's this again. That's where this idea of the generational jacket comes from, because I've lived it.
Yeah, that's nice. You took it off him when he didn't need it, right? You didn't just take it off him just because you liked it and he's now freezing somewhere.
Well, no, he bought a Lawrence jacket, so he's fine.
All right, okay, so you sorted out. That's good news.
Yeah. But then also, so it has to be. It's not just how it looks. It is function as well. So what I'm doing with the peacoat, and this is the thing that's actually been a struggle to figure out, is that I've lined the front and side panels with the same. It's a Hainsworth melton wool, and so it's lined with the same melton as the outer, at least on the front and side panels, to give you that warmth. Because obviously, the more air pockets you can create, the warmer it's going to be. And it's this kind of, you're buying it off a website, so until you get it in your hands, you don't know what it's going to feel like. So it's kind of reassuringly heavy by doing that. In the first sample, I'd done the back as well, but it just turned into like armor. It was too heavy.
Yeah, I imagine one of the bigger difficulties with doing peacoats is to kind of give it that svelte, fitted look without it looking too tight, and conversely not making it look like a sack that doesn't have any shape at all. But I guess when people buy online, there's an element of trust that you have to try and give them, and that reassurance.
And that's why I do all the videos on Instagram. I think that the last 7 reels on Instagram are me going through where I'm at with the second sample at the moment, just so people, the more you can see, the better decision you can make.
And follow the journey. So where can people follow you on Instagram, Mark?
So Instagram is Barnfield Customs. Website is barnfieldcustoms.com. In fact, everything is Barnfield Customs. But Instagram's where I kind of put my effort in terms of social.
Awesome. Well, people can head over there. We'll leave links in the show notes. Real quick, though, you got a podcast also of your own.
I do.
Thread Equity.
Thread Equity, a play on sweat equity, but keeping it clothing related. That's with James Shaw, who used to run Album Clothing, and he's over in Portugal. And we discuss our two brands and our 2 businesses, and really kind of just as a journal, but also so other people can follow along on that journey.
And here's me thinking you got that microphone and set up just for this podcast.
Just for this? No, of course.
That's how much of a narcissist I am. I'm like, wow, I must be hitting the peaks if everyone's now getting a microphone. I hit the summit there for a minute and then went down the other side of the mountain.
Sorry.
Mark, it was great talking to you. Best of luck with the
Yeah.
brand. I think the
Thank you very
jackets
much.
look
It's
great,
been
and
fantastic.
I look forward to joining your journey on Instagram as well. So, but in the meantime, Barnfield Customs, and yeah, hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.
You've been listening to the Menswear Style podcast. Be sure to head over to menswearstyle.co.uk for more menswear content, and email info@menswearstyle.co.uk if you would like to be a future guest on the show. Finally, please help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Until next time.